So I think this is probably a good time to hope our other guests will join us, and we'll probably start to kick off. So welcome to the latest 5% Club event, Leading Emerging Talent in a Post-COVID World. I'm delighted to have all of you joining us here today. We have got 94 people who signed up, so hopefully people will start coming in as I'm talking. This is a member-only event. I think during the whole lockdown era and over the summer, we were opening up all our events to everyone, which was great to have people who'd expressed an interest in the club join in as well. But we thought we'd make this one member only. So hopefully you are aware of who we are and know about us. But just to say, the club obviously is this movement of employers really committed to those values of giving people opportunities, gaining skills, and the whole earn and learn ethos. Our membership is rapidly growing. We're not far off 500, but we're always want more and more people to join the network. So do spread the word, and thank you for coming along today. I think we've got a great programme with our three speakers. The format today is going to be, we'll have a speaker who will speak for 10 minutes. Please post questions for that speaker, and I'll deal with that for like a 5-minute session. Then we'll do our next speaker, 5-minute Q&A. At the very end, we'll just field all questions to all speakers. Please post your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom. You'll probably see it down there. But if you end up putting something in chat, don't worry, I'll pick it up as well. I'm going to be darting between Q&A and chat. So please do come forward with your questions. And we are recording today's event. I'm going to make that available to members as well. It will be on our website with a password for all our members who wish to view it, who can't join us today. So I better go on and introduce our first speaker, as it's 12:03. We like to keep to time. Frank Clayton. Frank is Group Head of Learning at NG Bailey. He was awarded an MBE in, would you say it was the 2019 honours list, Frank? I always get confused because it's announced on New Year's Eve. I guess technically it was 2019, isn't it?
It was 19.
It was 2019 rather than So Frank was awarded the MBE for his work in promoting and supporting apprenticeships. Very much deserved. He is also chair of the Yorkshire and Humber Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, and I know he's exceptionally active in that network as well. So Frank, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill. I forgot about the MBE thing. It seemed like such a long time ago. And in one of those wonderfully humbling moments when we were at the Palace, my son spent all day following Ainsley Harriott around because he was there as well. So, you know, always trust your kids to keep you grounded. So in terms of today's subject, some of the thoughts that I wanted to share with you really stem from a conversation that began as part of the Ambassador Network that Jill's just mentioned. Typically, we've been getting together every fortnight. And as you can imagine, you know, we talk about all things apprenticeship related. And certainly for the last 6 months, as with most businesses and most people, our conversations and discussions have been very much focused on COVID-19 and thinking about, you know, what each of us can do as ambassadors to support the various programs that are running throughout Yorkshire and Humber, the apprentices that are in those programs, you know, they're dealing with some real challenges, and also how we can help the people that are there to support our apprentices. I think in some respects that group's a little bit of a forgotten group in some regard, which I guess is how we find ourselves having this conversation today. And whilst, you know, I'm sure we've all heard the word unprecedented probably far too many times over the last 6 months, you know, times are changing. And whilst I don't think for a minute that we're all going to end up home working for the rest of our lives, I think it's fair to say that for most people, even in the short term, how we go about leading and managing the people around us is going to change and is changing. And I think as our discussions as a network started to develop, it became, I guess, quite apparent to us that whilst there's lots being done about the logistics of bringing our people back, and equally about ensuring that we have the technology to do what we need to do, and rightly so, it seemed that we were perhaps neglecting some of the emotional side of that in terms of how we bring people back in a way that feels comfortable and allows us to continue to get the best out of our people, particularly I think our young people, as we were talking about it through the lens of the ambassador network. And again, you know, I suppose it's easy to say, you know, don't worry, people will figure it out, but you know, all of us base our decisions on our experiences, and we use those points of reference to kind of make a judgment call as to how we think best to proceed. And I don't know about any of the people on the call today, but my overall experience of global pandemics, nationwide lockdowns, and potentially crushing recessions is pretty small. So as a network, we started to look as a collective to start to pull together some, I guess, hints and tips that we could share with anybody who found themselves leading apprentices, young people, graduate programs, that we could drop into people's inboxes and just, I guess, start to prod some thoughts in people's minds about, if you're leading in this really challenging environment, are you thinking about this? Is this part of your thought process? Have you considered X? Are you doing Y? With a view to just starting to try and put the right kind of support mechanisms in place and help us navigate through this. And I suppose if I'm thinking about maybe trying to make that quite simplistic, I guess we wanted our people to think about their people as being people. I think it's very easy in this kind of situation to be very focused on the task, getting the job done and trying to, for example, keep service to your customers. But if our people aren't in a good place, then actually all that stuff's going to fall apart. And some of the, I suppose, nuggets I'd like to just share with you over the next five minutes or so might seem to be really quite obvious, and to be fair, a lot of them are. I think what was interesting is that as we've been having discussions with people within the network, with apprentices and their experiences of how they're being led and managed through some of the COVID situation, what became apparent was that, yeah, these things might be really obvious, but they're actually also quite lacking in a lot of people's experiences. So, for example, you know, we talk about how we bring people together when lots of us are working remotely. And, you know, simple things. How many meetings do any of you attend where people log into a Teams call or a Zoom call and their camera isn't on? Well, I need to see you. I want to see you. You know, again, similar to, I'm sure many people on the call, I've been locked in my conservatory for 7 months. I'm going bananas. I want some human contact. And if you are in an office, if we have people that are joining a group call, again, I've had calls where you have people that are in the same building but in separate rooms joining a Teams call. You can still go into the same room and have some interaction as long as you have some social distancing rules in place. Let's not completely abandon the need for contact. And when we're having those meetings, you know, think about, are you building time in just for an agenda, or are you building time in for your team to have a quick catch up before you even start? Because all of those normal things that we used to do, where you bump into somebody making a cup of coffee before the meeting, or you were grabbing some water, or just chatting on your way to a place, have gone. And if all we do is focus on the task at hand, yeah, okay, that keeps things moving in terms of the business, but it doesn't necessarily help our people to feel like they're part of a team and part of the collective. And then that sense of team, you know, lots of our people will be used to having performance conversations. We'll be used to having regular updates with whoever's working with them. And suddenly the world's changed. And whilst it's, again, a really obvious point, how much thought are we putting into having a different approach to communicating? Because, for example, some of our people are sat in an office, some of them are working from home, some of them have suddenly got a different schedule because they're looking after somebody, or they've got children and they're coping with different lockdown rules and kids in school and then not in school. Don't assume that everybody knows everything in terms of all those little conversations that go on. Again, I guess going back to that point about how much information and flow of information takes place informally. You know, how often do we chat about things with a couple of members of the team because we happen to be in the same room? Well, that's great, but if some of your team are remote and you haven't thought to relay that information to those people, then what happens the next time you're all together when the people who are working from home suddenly find that actually they don't know stuff that people who are still going into the office do? There's no sense of team if there's a disconnect within that flow of information. And again, think about the format of meetings. You know, I know this might sound a bit strange as we're clearly presenting to all of you, but actually, again, when we're having meetings through some kind of a digital format, you know, are we thinking about the structure of meetings in terms of it not just being one person presenting to a group, giving them instruction and sending them off to do things? You know, are you actually creating an environment where there's a discussion so that people actually feel like they're having a conversation with the people around them and have a sense of being part of something and some sense of guidance and I suppose motivation even? Because a lot of those things seem to be dropping away just because we've started to work digitally. And another thing that came up quite strongly in some of the conversations that we had was this assumption that actually with a lot of our younger people, whether they're apprentices, whether they're graduates, you know, actually the digital bit's fine, they get it. And yet when we were talking to different apprentices within Yorkshire and Humber, one of the things that came back really strongly was, no, we get it if you're talking about Facebook or Instagram or FaceTime, because that's how I talk to my friends. I haven't got a clue what that means at work because I don't associate that stuff with work necessarily because that's my private life. So in terms of the assurance that they know how to use these systems and not as just going, well, why don't you know how to use this? You're young. Doesn't necessarily make somebody feel that confident that we're treating them as a part of the team and helping them feel like they belong to what's going on. And then, you know, the challenges around those individuals' well-being, you know, levels of anxiety that are going on in terms of things like that, where there's an expectation of, well, why don't you know how Teams works? You're a young person. And the impact that then has on that person's sense of, well, maybe I'm not doing something I should do. Maybe I should know more about this because I happen to be young. And from a leader's point of view, you know, it's that question of how do you stop making those kind of assumptions? How do you start to actually be present for your people because they're in a very different place? Can you lead with compassion? How are you working on your empathy in terms of, all right, certain things may not frustrate you, may not be an issue for you, but actually, if you've got 20 years experience of working in business and you're dealing with a young person who's been in your organization or even in work for 2 years, this is all so beyond weird. What are you doing to just be present, listen to those people and just be non-judgmental in hearing what it is they've got to say and some of the challenges that you face and some of the challenges that they're facing because of this completely strange environment? And then, you know, how are you then helping them navigate through, you know, in terms of sense of purpose? You know, if you have a group of people that are as dispersed, how you lead them now is more important than ever. And yet, as I said, I think earlier, and particularly my experience working in an engineering business, our managers, our leaders are really focused on the task. They're engineers, that's what they do. But when we started to talk to them about how much time are you spending talking to your people? You know, have you been back and revised their goals and objectives from last year? Because let's face it, anything we put in the diary in January of this year is completely irrelevant in the world that we now live in. Do your people have new goals? Have you had a conversation with them about how they can shift the things that you targeted them to do so that they've got a sense of feeling like they're contributing and adding to what the business is trying to achieve in really challenging times? How often are you checking in? Because if somebody's remote, you probably need to check in more than you would do with somebody who's sat across a room from you, who you can get a sense of how they're feeling because you see them all day. And then even things like starting to talk to some of our leaders around how they manage the dichotomy in their teams where they've had people who were on furlough, people who weren't, because there's this whole link around almost where we started about bringing people together and giving people that sense of team, when actually a lot of us are in a place where some of our people were on furlough, some weren't. And how you have to kind of balance that sense of from some people, you know, that feeling of, well, I've worked through this. You were sat home for 5 months on holiday. And I've heard those comments, but then equally those people coming back into your business, we can't expect somebody who's not been in an organization for 5-6 months to just come in, hit the ground running and fly. And yet, if we don't make that clear, it's very difficult for that individual to feel often that they can actually put their hand up and say, I'm really struggling getting back up to pace. You know, I've forgotten stuff and I need a bit of help getting back in there. And if you're younger, if you're less experienced, that's a real challenge in terms of just being able to put your hand up and say, I'm really struggling with this. And, you know, without stealing any of Catherine's thunder as she comes in later on, you know, instances of young people struggling with their well-being, with anxiety, have been huge throughout COVID. And I think it's fair to say that the data would suggest they're being impacted by this much more than any other group, which just makes this kind of thought process much more important for anybody who happens to be leading, well, anybody to be fair, but this group almost more than most. And I guess, you know, by way of closing this off, and I appreciate that was a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the work that we're doing, but I guess, you know, the thought process behind that is really quite simple from our perspective, that how we lead today is going to have huge long-term consequences for our organizations and our people. And I guess, you know, the message from the work that we're doing is that we need to spend as much time and invest as much resource and money in preparing people for the emotional return to work and the support that people need in doing that, as we do for the logistics and the tech. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd love to have a good stab at answering them for you.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank. I think that was great. You said it was a whistle-stop tour, and it was, because that's what we wanted, that real flavour. And you've certainly picked up on things I know Chrissi and Catherine are going to be touching on. Had some great questions. Kirsty Wells from CADCO thinks that, you know, we assume we all communicate and learn in the same way, but she has, I hope this is all right to read this all out, Kirsty, but she said she's neurodiverse herself, and the current climate, you know, she feels has impacted her a lot and has probably impacted a lot of people in ways that haven't been thought about. So, you know, we're also screen focused. Is there ever, do any of us all, and I mean, I don't think I thought about it here, Kirsty, but if we think about content on screen, backgrounds, fonts, I think this is a really good point. Yeah. And they know little things are really important right now, and we need to think about individuals and not in a sweeping context. So I think that's a really good point, Kirsty, rather than a question, I hope, Frank. And you know, I think I'm as guilty of that as anyone. You know, you probably think of the task you need to achieve, get it done, to get the event off and get the meeting done. You probably don't think about that neurodiverse and that general overall diversity of people's needs in a team. People have asked a question here, Frank. Olivia Gaunt. Olivia, I think you're from one of our new members, Aerodactyl, so welcome. Olivia, so I'll read both questions. Wants to know, do we have any advice for onboarding a new apprentice while everyone works remotely? I mean, really difficult situation. And Liam saying great points. I'm very concerned about the L&D onboarding for new trainees and apprentices. A similar question. So, what advice would you say to people about the onboarding of the new people in the emerging talent teams?
I think for me that, and I think this applies to anybody. I think there has to be a real appreciation to the fact that this is very different, and as such, there's latitude in how we go about managing expectations as to getting people comfortable into a business. And I guess, you know, to some of the other points about people being different, you know, you'll have some people who, as part of that onboarding process, will be absolutely fine with it. I think the challenge is figuring out where you have individuals who maybe need a little bit more support, understanding what that is, and then helping them through it, because I think people will be in different places. And I guess in terms of the broader structure of your induction, you just have to have enough wiggle room in that to take in all those different sort of needs and requirements, because the fact is the situation we're going through kind of exacerbates that, it magnifies it, and you just need to give yourself time to get everybody to the same place without them feeling hurried.
I was on mute there and I started to talk. That's the classic error in these meetings. And another comment from Chantal, I think rather a question, but a great comment. Chantal from Schneider Electric, one of our patron supporters. Thank you for joining us. Schneider, she says they talk about creating new rituals to manage the situation, and team dynamics need to change and be flexible. And I think that's a really interesting point. And Frank, in terms of your team, would you have you observed how team dynamics have really changed?
Yeah, I think with us, certainly with my own team, I think one of the things we've looked at is looking for some of the positives out of the change in the situation. And I guess by way of an example, you know, and Chrissi knows the guys and girls that I work with, you know, we've always been quite a hard charging team. There's a lot going on in our business. And one of the things that's come out of COVID is when you don't have to do as much traveling, there's a bit more time for good stuff. You know, so I've now got at least 2 members of my team who are or have done the couch to 5K and are now running 3 times a week, and that's now part of their schedule. And we work around it. You know, I've got one member of the team that's now got a gym membership, never been to a gym before ever, picked it up during COVID and is now down that place. As I think you and I have said in the past, you know, I'm now on my bike 6 days a week. And I think we've started to figure out that there's some positives you can get out of this that help you remain balanced, because, you know, the challenge from being in one place is you can spend all day looking at a screen, and that's not good for you. And I think acknowledging some of that stuff is really positive. You know, I was having a conversation somebody the other week, and we came up with this: if you do back-to-back Teams calls all day, you kind of get all the physical effects of binge watching Netflix with none of the joy. You know, because by the end of the day, you know, your face is bright red, your eyes are killing, you've got a headache, and you can't even brag that you've watched all the first 3 seasons of Breaking Bad. It's not healthy. And I think we just need to be honest enough about we can change things, we can manage stuff ourselves, because the world's different. So just go with what works.
No, that's great, Frank. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll get more questions at the end and get you. I think I particularly take up that point that we can all end up sitting down staring at a screen for many hours, and that's certainly not healthy for anyone. So brings us on to our next speaker, if we can bring that. So Chrissi McCarthy, who is with us. Thank you, Chrissi. Frank introduced me to Chrissi, and it was a great link. Chrissi is the MD of Constructing Equality, which specialises in equality, diversion, I'll get this right. Equality, inclusion, diversity and fairness in the construction sector. Chrissi worked for 10 years in construction on various sites, and on her website says she's passionate about living by our social conscience, but also passionate about construction and its reputation, which I think it is great. So she's going to do a whole session for us now about equality and fairness, which Frank alluded to, which I think is really interesting, about people being on furlough or not on furlough, people having pay cuts or not having pay cuts. And actually, once Chrissi and I started to chat about this, it's actually a really interesting subject. So without further delay, Chrissi, I shall hand over to you.
Okay, I'm just going to put a little timer on so that I don't do that. So thank you all. And thanks, Frank, for the introduction. It's a fun opportunity. So my work really looks at improving organisations by improving the experiences of people within them. And I think that's really important, because quite often this kind of work falls into the right thing to do. There's lots of things that are the right thing to do. You're a builder, you don't go and build a home for everyone in the country. If you're an M&E specialist, you don't provide electricity for everyone for free. It's got to be context in there somewhere, because there is so much to be done. So at least if we align it to our businesses, we can start to get somewhere for everybody. So the way that I tend to work is I take my background as a setting out engineer, as a site manager. I take the experiences and, more importantly, the feelings that I had when I worked in construction. And then I look at the research and find out if it's indicative of things that other people have experienced and feel. And then I create practical solutions to bring organizations the best return on investment that they can have. And so my core work looks at the organization. I suppose researchers would say my core work is sociology, but I tend not to try and scare the business world with that too much, don't worry. So I want us to think about how the way that we run our businesses impacts our employees. And quite often we think we're doing that and we're not. So I want to use mental health as an example of this. So with mental health at the moment, there's been an awful lot of a flurry upon this. So terrible statistics in construction around being 4 times more likely to try and take your own life if you work in construction than anywhere else. So we've seen a lot of work around mental health, but most of it has been targeted at the individual. So we've got things like mental health first aiders, we've got poster campaigns, very much targeted at how to improve individuals and how do individuals improve themselves. If we look to the research, it consistently tells us that the things that are bringing about stress and challenges with mental health in construction are linked to long hours cultures, presenteeism, stressful environments, and one of the main ones, poor personal management. Not management of tasks, we are very good at that in construction. We can manage the hell out of a task. But when it comes to managing people, we have got to start to realize, if we haven't already, we're a little bit lost. And I want us to consider this a little bit through something called double loop thinking, which, sorry, I'm going to mention an academic called Chrissi. He came up with this, and I love this idea. I think it simplifies things. So he tells this story of a guy who's sitting by a river fishing. And as he's fishing, a body starts floating down the river. So he's a nice dude. He goes into the river, fishes the body out, starts doing CPR. The body comes to life. And they're just sort of finding their feet again when they notice another body floating down the river. Now, this time the guide noticed that the waders he was wearing had kind of filled with water, had gotten in the way, so he takes his waders off. And he goes back into the water and he fishes this body out. And he does the CPR and everything. And as they're all sort of recollecting again, they notice another body floating in the water. But this time, he doesn't go into the water. He walks away, he walks up the bank. And the 2 people he rescued turn to him in a state of panic and say, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And he says, "I'm going to go and find out why the bodies are falling in." And I think that's what we need to start doing. We need to start finding out why the bodies are falling in. Because at the moment, all we are doing is consistently taking off our waders. And it's not helping us. We're throwing money out of the window. We're losing good people. It's affecting people's mental health. It's a challenge. So, and also, do we really think this has given us the best return on investment? So what can we do? Okay, there are lots of good solutions, and I'm not suggesting what I'm going to suggest is the only one, but it is a framework that I think provides the best return on investment from a lot of research and a lot of looking out there. And it's using fairness as a tool. Now, I need to be clear on this because I've heard fairness used in a range of wonderful ways, and some of them are not going to help your business. You cannot tell your business, people within your business, that it's fair, because fairness is a perception of how just people think your business is, okay? It's their perception, not yours to tell them. You start telling people something's fair when they don't think it is, you just end up with a lot of, can't use the word I wanted to, annoyed people, okay? And that's not what we're trying to achieve here. So fairness is kind of, that's that perception of how fair things are, sorry, how just your organization is. Now, unfair organizations, so organizations that employees don't believe are fair, they don't think treat them right. What happens in those organizations, if I'm an employee and I don't perceive my organization to be fair, I tend to start to act in a really individualistic way. I've got to look out for me because I don't think that the organization is going to. Now, in those environments, a range of things happen. People can stop being as productive as they were. they can start to reduce the effort that they put in, almost like they want to balance the scales. The organisation isn't given to me, so I'm not giving to them. They're less likely to do things for organisational citizenship behaviours. Academia good with catchy titles. And all that means is things like altruism, civic virtue to one another, caring about other people, bringing people along and upskilling other people as part of your role. All of that tends to pretty much grind to a halt when people perceive the organisation to be unfair. But don't worry, it's not all just doom and gloom. When people perceive our organisations to be fair, something kind of beautiful happens. We'll start to act in a really collective way. If we perceive that our organisations have our best interests at heart, are working to help us, then we're happy to give back because we trust what will be good for the business will eventually be good for us. So we start to work more, put more effort in, help other people because we're less frightened of them. We become less frightened of difference, actually, because we trust the processes of the organisation. It's kind of a beautiful thing. And to help us understand how we can use that, it's best to break fairness down into kind of three main areas. They're called distributive, procedural, and interactive. So I'll explain these for you. So distributive is about what we get. Procedural is about how we decide how we're going to distribute it. And interactive is how we communicate it. So I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine that I've offered you a post within my organisation, and you all seem like very qualified people. So I'm going to offer you, say, £70,000 a year. Anyone lives in London, just double it, I think. I'm not too sure. I live in Liverpool, I think. They just achieve it. So imagine that I'm paying you £70,000 a year. And if you're happy with that, that's excellent. If you're not, sorry, go to a figure that you're happy with. And now say you come to work with me and you find out that you're working alongside someone else who has the same skills, the same responsibility, the same many years of practice as you do, everything, same qualifications, everything seems to be the same. Except for one thing. They're paid £10,000 a year more than you. Do you still feel happy about what you're being paid? Now, there's always an outlier, and those people will be happy for the rest of their lives. But most of us won't. Something called relative deprivation, and it's this. We don't really care about how much we're paid, or at least not as much as we think we do. We are much more interested in how much we're paid compared to the people that we work alongside. Okay? That shift can really impact upon people's productivity and how much they bring into the workplace. The second thing, procedural justice. This is where it gets interesting. Say you found out that the reason that person was on £10,000 more was because I've got a, quite frankly, terrible business strategy, but nonetheless, where I pay people £10,000 a year as a loyalty scheme for every year that they're with the company. People often start to feel a little bit better because they know that this now applies to them as well. Okay, the rule seems fair, it balances out. Isn't it funny? Because nothing's really actually changed for us, just the way that we feel and the way that we respond in the workplace. So our procedural justice, the reason we make decisions, tends to overrule our distributive justice, the decisions that are made. But the third point is by far the most interesting one. It's interactive justice. It's how we then communicate that. Imagine I just didn't tell you. I didn't tell you about this bonus scheme. And you found out 6 months down the line, but you found out about the person being paid more than you a month in. You spent 5 months stewing on that, and then I just dropped it into a conversation. I can't imagine that many of you would actually be that happy with me. We see this so much with redundancies, that whole kind of, we understood that they had to make redundancies, but it's the way that they did it. Why did they drop it in an email? Okay? Interactive justice, the way that we communicate information, our managers and our senior leadership, but particularly managers, overrules pretty much everything else that we do within our organisation in terms of our perceptions of fairness. And that's why it's so important to get it right, and also so incredibly worrying that it's so neglected within construction at the moment. So, no, see where I am, my notes and my timing. I do apologise. Okay, I'm running over a bit, I'm sorry, I'll speed. Okay, so But then we also need to think a little bit about equality and diversity, because it's so easy to assume what's fair to the kind of average white man in an organisation that we tend to write most of our policies for is fair for everybody. And that's just not the case. The minute that you have any additional consideration, things change. So for example, the comment made before by someone about neurodiversity and how the simple change of a font or colour paper can make somebody's life incredibly easy. And that's the thing about equality and diversity. Everybody thinks it's the big bad discrimination of people being terrible to one another. But actually, most of the worst discrimination is these small microaggressions, tiny little things that just make life a little bit harder. But there's a lot of them. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. And I really think we need to change our perspective on equality, by the way. It shouldn't be something that we feel we have to do because of legislation or it's the right thing to do. Well, it is a tool to help us achieve our business goals. It truly is something that can help us bring our people up to where we want to go. So I tend to work in a way that first establishes a base level of fairness, which is about creating that collective environment that we can then build upon to then establish what inequalities are existing and then moving on to equality. And if you do that out of order, you're as good as throwing money out of the window. Please do always bear in mind, diversity does not equal inclusivity. Okay? Just because you've got a diverse range of people does not mean that they're having a good experience. If you focus on diversity, you may as well just go to a window and throw your money and your time out of it. Okay? But if you focus on inclusivity and do it well, diversity shall eventually come to you. I was going to talk about how we apply this to COVID, but I really messed up on time here, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave you with the takeaways of one, ensure that your organisational process considers its impact upon employees at all levels of the organisation, not just at that individual level. Structure your decisions using fairness models in order to help improve employee perceptions, and also try and use equality and diversity as a tool to help improve employee experience. Thank you, and sorry about the time.
Thank you, Chrissi. I think that was a very thought-provoking presentation. I will do one question, because obviously conscious of time, wanting to make sure Catherine, to be fair to Catherine, that she has her time slot. But you didn't pick up on the, I know you ran a kind of out of time around COVID, but I think it's like Frank alluded to as well. It's something I've heard other of our people in our network are struggling with, that whole piece around, because of COVID, the impact. I mean, we know COVID has impacted our society and people in our society in very different ways, depending on their life situations. In the workplace and in workplaces you come across where there is that furlough, not furloughed, redundant, not redundant, can you say a quick piece about that, of how, just some tips of how people are dealing with that and you know, making it better for the people involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things I keep seeing being missed out is employee voice. So for example, for some people, furlough's the dream. For other people, they cannot think of anything worse. For some people, having to work from home on a reduced age of 10% when nursery isn't allowing children in, and suddenly your children have got to spend 2 weeks with you, that's a difficult thing to juggle. The point is, different people need and want different things. And being able to try and understand that a little can help you make decisions that are useful for everybody, or at least as close to, obviously there's no holy grail in this difficult situation. So I'd say understand the importance of voice. Within reason, of course, you have to do what's reasonably practicable. You can't be exhausting yourselves. And two, just try and think beyond your own experience. So for me, before I became a mother, I just could not fathom the needs of looking after a child under 3 years old. And as a mother, I suddenly realized that takes up an awful lot of your time. And it was certainly something that was missing from my thought process. And so, you know, understanding people's experiences really does involve speaking to them, getting some feedback from them. And this is the really important thing. People that are supported are often and usually incredibly loyal to your organizations. They'll put up with more from you and they will stay with you longer. So, you know, don't just do this to be kind, do this because there's also a very strong economical argument.
Thank you. And it's an interesting theme because Frank touched on this as well. Just think beyond yourself and your own situation. So we'll move on now to our final speaker, Catherine Bassay. Catherine and I met about 2 or 3 years ago, I think, when we both were involved in a movement called Engagement for Success, which is a very interesting movement about employee voice and employee engagement. Catherine at that point was working at Unison, the trade union, as head of staff engagement and innovation. And we met and we chatted and I think got on and just, you know, it was really interesting to find out the values of Unison and indeed the club's network, which there was a lot of overlap and a lot of similarity. Catherine's now had a career change and she has set up her own coaching and facilitation business. Catherine's involved in the London Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, so another link there. And I think we both wanted to highlight that for those for whom this might be of interest and relevance, it is World Mental Health Day on Sunday, I think on the 10th, Saturday. So, without much further ado, I'll hand you over to Catherine for her presentation.
Thank you, Jill. So thank you. So I've, in the sort of interest of neurodiversity, I like a picture. So kind of just to bring something new into the session now. So, and I've been listening with fascination to all that's been said so far. And yes, from the trade union perspective, all that you said, Chrissi, about fairness is really kind of music to my ears. So that was fascinating. So, I mean, it's interesting, Jill, you posted this as a kind of post-COVID world. I mean, it doesn't feel to me as if we are kind of post-COVID yet. And I don't know whether kind of people are sort of, you know, familiar with the concept of wicked issues, that kind of sense that actually this isn't a linear problem that we can solve from one perspective. We need many, many kind of eyes on all of this in order to kind of get through it well. And there are many, many issues. And just to kind of highlight and pick up on kind of what people have been saying already, sort of 3 things here. The mental health thing we've talked about, and absolutely mental health, World Mental Health Day is the 10th of October each year. And Mind, in fact, have got a lot of campaign information if you want to kind of have a look at what they're doing in terms of kind of, you know, the just do one thing kind of piece, which I think is really worth a look at. We've touched a little bit on equality, but I mean, I think there's a huge polarisation going on, kind of even worse than it was in the Social Mobility Commission report, which I've just referenced at the bottom there, and is on the full report is on the 5% Club website. But, you know, already kind of people's experience, you know, some of us live in comfortable homes, some of us are sharing very tiny flats with kind of kids crawling over us. You know, the whole kind of equality piece, I think, has got kind of really polarized and puts apprentices in the most difficult of those kind of positions in many cases. And this third thing, the kind of my safety pin, was really about this focus on health and safety rather than health and well-being. And I understand why. Obviously, we have to kind of think about social distancing and all the kind of rules and regulations that are applying. But I think it is at the risk of the longer term well-being agenda. And I think we just need to be careful that we're not taking our eye off the ball, if you like, on that kind of storing up of longer term problems. And, you know, I think there's kind of, yeah, I think the mental health agenda is going to be complicated moving forward. So Brian, if I could have my next slide. So in kind of good sort of, you know, consultancy style, I've got a 3-point plan for you, which I'm hoping will kind of perhaps kind of be a bit of an overarching kind of way of shaping some of the thinking from the speakers you've heard already. And I'm certainly not claiming to have all the answers. And if people have got kind of suggestions to pop into the chat box or the Q&A, I think that would be a really good way of kind of, you know, bringing more resources and more kind of thinking into the club membership. And I think, you know, we've already been sort of opening the conversation. I think it is more challenging now, but there are opportunities. And in a sense, many apprentices are of the generation where digital work is kind of a more natural place to be. And I think we can really sort of learn from the kind of coaching world here in this idea of start with a beginner's mind. I don't know whether you've come across that concept, but that whole idea about, you know, not assuming that you know, and treating everybody really as an individual, because we all have different histories, different experiences. We're all coming from a different place. So the more that you can kind of open that conversation and you know, things like kind of, using breakout rooms, kind of making more intimate spaces in the virtual space where people can explore a question. I do a lot of work with the time to think approach around, turning an agenda into a series of questions. So, that immediately kind of starts to stimulate your thinking into, well, what could we do here? What is the possibility? And things like, using team meetings to kind of normalize a lot of the conversations around kind of, mental health day. What are we doing to support our mental health? We all have mental health, whether it's kind of in a poor shape or a good shape, is a kind of continuum. So, normalize it, get people in your organization perhaps to share stories about, how they've kind of managed a particular kind of challenge and what's worked for them, kind of bring it into the open. And Brian, if I could have the next picture. And this next slide here is trying to kind of encourage you to think about that whole experience of mapping. We talk a lot about kind of mapping the kind of customer experience, if you like. Some organizations are a bit more enlightened, think about the colleague experience, but what about kind of drilling that down into a specific apprenticeship experience? Because I think there are differences, and again, we won't know fully what those are unless we really ask, and the whole employee voice piece is really important here. But the whole thing, I mean, people have already asked about kind of, how do you do the onboarding, all the way through the kind of, what's the furlough meant for those individuals? What are their anxieties about kind of what's going to happen afterwards? Is there a secure role for this person after their apprenticeship is finished? And kind of don't be afraid of having an honest conversation. I mean, I think we kind of tend to sort of shy away from being an adult to an adult, and tend to assume that people kind of can't take a difficult message. And I think what's much more difficult is not to be brought into that conversation. I think we can take much more difficult information as long as it's treated with kind of integrity and kind of dignity. And Brian, if we could move on then. So my third slide here is about building collaboration and compassion, and really kind of having a sense of building a kind of a wraparound around each individual apprentice, if you like. So obviously the line manager is key. And as I say, I think encouraging that kind of compassion and adult to adult conversation for line managers is really important. And many organizations have coaches and mentors and buddies. I think you can have all three of those roles. Actually, I've certainly been involved where you've kind of, you've had people fulfilling different roles. And I think that's perhaps an area where onboarding buddies can be really useful. Just that, who's the person that you kind of, you have a chat, coffee, virtual coffee chat with, whatever, to kind of, ask those silly questions. Again, I've really forgotten what I'm doing here. You can ask those silly questions of somebody who's kind of, knows the ropes, but isn't going to be kind of judgmental, if you like. And think about internal support networks. I mean, we've had some examples already, the kind of, working parents, people with kind of disabilities of various different sorts. There are kind of niche areas where people can feel very isolated, and just, think about them, think about how, because in a normal situation, you'd have much more of an opportunity to meet and find out who might be useful to you to talk to. But in the virtual world, we need to give a bit more thought to how that might work. Talk to your training providers, let them know that you're kind of open to ideas, that you're wanting to be alerted if there's something kind of, that somebody is concerned about somebody. And I think one of the ways that if you're in touch with people, it's easier from a relational point of view to then notice when something is amiss for that individual, because you'll start to notice somebody withdrawing slightly or kind of being less active. And those are the kind of danger points where it's important to kind of, to be kind of kindly curious, if you like, compassionately curious. And yeah, kind of all colleagues. Bit of a throw out there for National Apprenticeship Week next February. I mean, again, a kind of a point to aim towards in terms of engaging your apprenticeship workforce. And these three things I've put in along the bottom: purposeful work, that sense of belonging and being heard. I think it's very easy to kind of, as you get more senior in an organisation, to kind of forget that actually all of those things are kind of there for you, but somebody new coming into your organisation who's really building their understanding of the work world, really needs support to kind of to feel that they belong and that they're heard and that their work is meaningful and important. So Brian, if I could come to my last slide, I've put, I mean, I actually think there is a lot of reading material out there. There is a lot that we can sort of dip into. So I've put some resources down the left-hand side, which are very specifically targeted at the kind of apprenticeship world, and the ones on the right are more general ones. But I mean, again, I think they all have kind of a role to play. And I've just stuck at the bottom there the employee assistance programs that I know many organisations have, but I also know that often the uptake isn't very good. And I think that's because people don't really understand, you know, a lot of them, for example, offer support to managers of people who are struggling. And I think to encourage managers to go to those programs and ask for assistance in how they can deal with it can be really encouraged and again normalized as a kind of, you know, almost an expectation that this is what you will do in order to kind of be a compassionate manager rather than it being seen as a sign of failure. And obviously, you know, GPs play a role in here, but I think the kind of the little signpost icon there is just to remind me to say that, you know, I think there's a lot more we can do about signposting and normalising and making sure, you know, you've got information at the bottom of an email or, you know, anything that's kind of going out regularly to people that will kind of be the thing that they'll remember to go to if, you know, in that dark moment. So, and as I say, if people have other resources or kind of ideas to share, then I think that would be great to kind of add to that list. It's certainly by no means exhaustive. So Jill, I'll stop there and see what questions have come in, if any.
Great, thanks, Catherine. And just to take on Catherine's point there, if people have got other resources that they've used or they think are really useful, feel happy to ping it in the Q&A or the chat, or just email me after this, and we can perhaps put those somewhere on our website for people to access and we can share more widely, perhaps. Please do put some of your questions through if you've got any, but it's one of the difficult, we've only got a few minutes left, but I'm interested to ask all our speakers, and it's a slightly difficult question. So Frank, I'm going to go to you first, just prepare you. I mean, how do you see the next 6 months? It's a really difficult question, I know, but what can we do to prepare ourselves? What can we do around our emerging talent teams, our young people? You know, I think we all acknowledge that young people in particular are really bearing the brunt of a lot of the impacts of COVID. What in your business are you anticipating, and what sort of building blocks are you putting in place to perhaps try and mitigate some of the things that are going to impact?
I think for us, and I guess this stems from a comment that Chrissi made, with us very specifically as an engineering business. I think what we're trying to do is generate the conversation with our people leaders about that focus on their people. You know, as I think Chrissi said, we can manage the heck out of the task, and we can. I think we are often less impressive in the way that we support our people, and for us, it's about sort of reminding ourselves we're a people business. We do what we do because of the people we have. You know, we are successful because of the people we have. We don't do anything you can't procure somewhere else. So let's start thinking about those people as the valuable assets that they are, and taking a bit more time. And I think, you know, if anything, we had a couple of calls recently where, you know, almost the key takeaway was, guys, at the minute, it's okay almost not to have a plan. You know, use common sense, go with it, take time to think about stuff. And I think probably to emulate some of the points that Catherine made, you know, it's this thing about just be compassionate. You don't know what's going on in so many people's lives at the minute. And let's face it, that's going to carry on. So take some time, be present, don't judge, and just listen. And you'd be surprised where that'll take you.
Just unmute myself, sorry. Yeah, thanks. And Chrissi, coming to you, I mean, again, you deal with lots of businesses and you deal with lots of people. In terms of where people are, what do you get a feel for people's views of the next 6 months and what they can do to plan around that?
Yeah, it's going to entirely depend upon the organisations. So, so I work with some great clients, and most of my clients I like anyway, obviously, but like companies like M.C.I.O.B have already got a well-perceived perception of fairness underneath them, and that means that their organisations are going to trust, also the people in the organisations are going to trust the decisions that the organisation is making a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit smoother, it's going to be a little bit easier. But then in organisations that haven't got that base, that haven't got that perception of fairness, what you're going to see is you're going to be fighting a lot more against the people that are working with you. And the reason for that is because every one of your decisions, they're not trusting at a base level. And I'd say for those organisations, this is a really good opportunity for you to kind of press the reset button and to start to say, right, okay, right, we see that we haven't always got it right, but this is what we're going to do for the future, and really try and use it as an opportunity to state how you're going to change and maybe show how this situation is reflected that you maybe haven't got it right. And for organisations that are closer to M.C.I.O.B that have already got that perception of fairness pre-built in, and usually because of hard work that you've done in the past, I'd say make sure that you're using that as well. Make sure that you are recognising that these things are not coincidence. These things are a reflection of hard work that you've done. So make sure that when you're putting your strategy together, you are reflecting on the situation that you have rather than just applying anything, because you'll get further by knowing where you are.
Great, thank you. And Catherine, I know you deal with a wide range of people and through the London Apprenticeship Ambassador Network. And again, do you have a sense of where people are feeling they are at the moment and the next 6 months, and you know what they're going to have to do and put things in, what they're going to have to put in place, and how do they see themselves faring through that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I certainly have a sense that there are organisations that are really managing this well, or leading this well, and actually almost maximising some of the opportunities that are kind of are available actually, and other people are kind of really struggling, and I think that kind of the difference is the relational side of it for me. And you'll be familiar perhaps with Maya Angelou's quote about, you know, people will forget what you did and what you said, but how you made them feel they will remember. And I think there's, you know, I think a lot of research came out of the economic recession in 2008-9 that you know, the companies that made their people feel, you know, kind of good were the ones that kind of came out of the recession much better than the ones that really couldn't kind of crack that. So I think it's about, yeah, the kind of building the relationship and the trust, and yeah, trying to grow. Actually, I think there is still windows for growing.
Right, thank you. Sorry, I'm having difficulty coming off mute there. Well, it's now 12:58, which brings us 2 minutes to our close. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and to our 3 great speakers. Thank you. All very different subjects, but really interlinked. And I suppose the thing that I've really taken away from it and jotting notes were, we've all got to think beyond ourselves, and that's so true. I was talking to someone the other day who has a young child and is a single parent, and how much she's been having to work through this under really difficult circumstances. And you just suddenly realise, if you've only got yourself to think about, how different your life is to that person. And you know, I think someone else said the beginner's mind. You know, the focus on people and other people's experiences. Jill Coyle from Nestle. Jill, thank you very much. Great presentations, everyone. She's posted that comment. So thank you all. We will have this recording available for members. And Tracy Johnson just said, great insightful session. Thank you. Well done, everyone. And a great thing for us to go away and reflect on, I think. I think we've all got to reflect on what we've all just heard and see our role in it. Thank you to all our attendees for joining us. Really good of you to make time for us. Kerry Travers says thank you all as well. Thank you, Kerry. Our next event is going to be on the 12th of November, which Jill Call for Nestle will be part of, and I'm going to advertise that out soon. Be great if as many of you as possible can join us. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you. And Norma, thank you for your great comment, and Pete, great to see you all virtually. Hopefully, at some point, we can all meet physically. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and you know, best of luck over the next few weeks. I think we're all probably going to need it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, panelists. I think